When is the last time you had a rest day or a Sabbath? If it takes you more than a moment to recall, that is not a good sign. I have been there, running myself exhausted, caring for everyone, and my self-care is the last thing on the list. Today, I'm sharing how over time you can create a rest or Sabbath day that will give you energy to do your roles as a wife and a mom. Hey friend, do you feel frustrated or alone in your relationship? Or feel hopeless of life ever changing in your family? Would you love to become unstuck, learn to heal, and connect with what your heart enjoys? Well, I am so glad you're here. I'm Christina, married 16 years to a neurodiverse man, mom of 3, and many more roles. Welcome to the Women in Neurodiverse Relationships podcast. Grab your sanity latte, listen in as we take another small step on the journey of intentional living. Before we dive in, I invite you to join our email family for extra self-care supports and tips. Plus, I'm launching a planner designed specifically to help you harmonize your self-care with your many roles. So sign up now through the link in the show notes for more information. Speaking of self-care, in the past, I experienced very stressful days, and I still do at moments, but it was a normal occurrence for me when I look back in time. And self-care was not even on the agenda. My mornings were filled with chasing kids around who are avoiding to get dressed. The kids did not like the seams or the clothes or how they fit. Also, I had kids upset about food textures that resulted with food on the floor or sometimes even on the wall. And then their anxiety was increasing as they thought about going to school and how the schedule was not up to them. And the topics were not preferred, but also there was so many things going on in school itself that was either confusing or frustrating. Some topics, they were way beyond, and other topics, they didn't see how it was relevant to life. So the anxiety for school was increasing. On this particular morning, my spouse was on a work call, and he was angry that the kids were not staying quiet. And I felt that pressure that it was my job and role to keep the kids quiet. And as that pressure built, one of my kids, the youngest one, would decide often their clothes was not working out and whoop, as I mentioned in the past, they would come off and we had to get out the door. So that feeling of having to meet the needs of getting my kids to school, but also of my spouse wanting it quiet as he was doing his job, which is understandable, but at the same time, that morning hour was complete chaos for like an hour and a half. It was just complete, utter chaos. And so that pressure I felt started right away as soon as I started working with the kids. And it continued. During this time, I had therapists that were coming to the home working with my youngest child. And during the day, the therapist would ask our kiddo to do an activity that was a little bit beyond their current capability. And they had to work on previous skills. And there would be a meltdown because of fear of letting someone down or a failure. And then being out in public, being around loud noises in the parking lot, in the store, the loudspeaker, super loud music, carts making a lot of clanky noises, all of that. There'd be meltdowns depending upon how overwhelmed they already were from the day. Multiple different reasons for meltdowns. So I spent a lot of energy helping my child co-regulate, which is helping another person who is not able to regulate themselves at that moment. They rely on another person to regulate. For example, using a heavy blanket that I would lay down on my child to help them relax, and then creating the right environment. But I had to stay calm. When your child is unregulated and you begin to increase your tone in sarcasm or anger, you know what happens. Your kid gets even worse, right? Because they already are off kilter as it is. And then you add in your own energy of being frustration and anger, and then it just kablooey, right? So the amount of energy of staying calm and regulated and helping my child go through multiple moments was a lot. So it came to the point of picking up the kids from school, and I was already exhausted. It was around 3:30, and my kids who were at school were already at their limit, and also the ones at home, they were at their limit from having to navigate unexpected behaviors, unexpected actions of others, unexpected responses, and not understanding so much in their worlds when they were at school. At home, I was able to foreshadow what was going to happen. I was able to explain in the moment what was going on. But for the kids at school, they didn't have that. It was oftentimes just frustrating with instructions that teachers would give, but if they gave it very quickly and the instructions were not written down on a piece of paper when they gave them the assignment, and they would ask questions and the teacher was thinking they weren't listening, and then trying to keep their bodies still while they're in school because the expectation is that somehow kids should be able to sit for how many hours at one time and not move around, which was very hard for my kids. So they focus on sitting still, but they're not able to focus on what the teacher is saying. So you can see by the time they got done with school, they were a hot mess and they were ready to call it quits. And I am picking them up, and it was a common thing, especially when they were grades 4 and under, picking them up, and the meltdown would happen either as they were walking out of the door of school, before they walked out of the door of school, or as we were walking to the car. And there were so many times when I was just trying to navigate them. Let's just get you to the car. I will get you home. We will help you. But right now, having this meltdown while it is raining and I have no umbrella, and I have 2 other kids are having a meltdown because we're not in the car yet, is really not helping at all. So I think you can picture how these days were for me. And in fact, when I got home then, these meltdowns caused more issues for my spouse. So I had that pressure always going on of being between 2 parties, between my spouse and the kids, having to explain and trying to understand what they were going through, but also explain to others within the family what was happening. If I could summarize how my life felt during that time, I would use the movie Groundhog. It felt like the same day repeating over and over and over of meltdowns, frustrations, blow-ups, caught between spouse and kids, problems with clothes, with food, sounds for the whole family. And it was on repeat. Now, they might get breaks. They might get resolutions after, and especially for those who are neurodiverse, when they have this meltdown, they feel all better. I mean, all this pumped up energy and frustration has kept continuing growing and growing and growing. Once it came out and they were removed from the situation and everything was calm, they were good. But for me, when you think about it, anyone who's in a neurodiverse family, if you are the one who is experiencing it or receiving it or around it, those many meltdowns, and you take that many people, and if each person is just having one meltdown in a day, and sometimes it's multiple, that is a lot. Out of that heartache, I began trying to figure out solutions of how do I help myself? Like, how do I do this? Today, I'm sharing some of them with you. First, I want to begin with the foundation for this thought of having a Sabbath or a rest day. For those not in the Christian community, the word Sabbath is used to refer to a day of rest, usually Sunday, but for some it could be Saturday, or if you have one of those really kind of crazy schedules when you're working swing shifts, it's basically changing almost every week because your day off has to. So I want to real quickly just kind of go back and look at some Bible verses so you know where I'm coming from with this. So you go back in Genesis 2, God was making the world, and the 7th day, so Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 through 3. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating he had done. So God wasn't exhausted. He doesn't need to rest, but he is making an example to us about resting and made it holy. The fact that that's a day that we cease in work. He is making an example for us. Okay, later on in Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11, Remember the Sabbath by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, your male or female servants, or your animals, or any foreigners residing in your towns. So again, the reiteration of having a day to be resting. And it all points back to God. In Mark 2, verse 27, and he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for Sabbath. And this is very important because we see that God made the Sabbath for a couple of reasons. And this could be a whole podcast, really, episode. But highlight level is one, God was showing us as people, you need to cease your striving and your work, and you need to rely on me to provide for you. When we put down our activities, our work, our efforts, and if we say, I'm done and I'm resting and that God can carry what I'm not doing today, that's making a very bold statement. But also, it also points to the gospel and the work that Jesus did for us and that he completed the work for us and we can rest in that. That's a whole nother deeper concept to consider. What I'm trying to convey here is that having a day of rest is something that God said that we should do, and he modeled it, and it's in the commandments, but also it's in the New Testament. And the goal of it is that we are acknowledging it's not our own efforts, and we're relying on him. And also, we are not made to be Energizer bunnies. I mean, this hustle culture, this was not something that was present hundreds of years ago. This is a recent phenomenon, and it is, I believe, a reflection of a lack of reliance on God. If you're not a person of faith, or you're more skeptical about this whole rest because it sounds way too weird, let's just look at this from a logical standpoint. Does your car need gas? Yes, it does. Does the garden need to be watered? Yes. Is there rhythms of life all around us that show there are times for activity and times for ceasing and for resting? How long can a person do a high output activity every single day, 24/7, for days and weeks and months upon end? That we can't, right? So whether you have a faith perspective or not, this idea of rest is needed. In fact, when you go to sleep at night, your brain has a glymphatic system, which sounds like lymphatic, but it's different. Glymphatic, G-L-Y. But that, it washes and cleanses your brain as you sleep at night. When you go to bed and rest, right there, the Bible's being carried out. There is so much that your body is doing to restore and renew. And so when we do not do sleeping, when we don't take active rest in our lives, there are impacts to us. So as I mentioned, one of the reasons why this is important is resting is showing our reliance on God for our needs. Also, though, resting is connected with joy. There's a study with Dr. Stephanie Holmes and her husband, Reverend Dan Holmes, and I'll put the link in the show notes to her page. But she's going through the book Bounce by Dr. Marcus Warner. And in it discusses how there's a connection between rest and joy. If you are not getting the rest, and again, this is a very basic explanation because the book really goes in great detail, but how rest is really needed for us to be able to experience and to have joy. Also, rest represents margin in our life. And especially if you have kids in your life that have a neurodiverse, you know that having margin is so important. You're doing like the whole mom math in your head of when you have to get to an appointment. And you figure in, okay, I got 15, 20 minutes to get to the appointment. I have 10 minutes to get my kids into the car. I have 30 minutes to get my kids dressed and everything packed up. And then I would throw in an extra 10, 15 minutes for the usual, oh my gosh, I didn't foresee this happen. Yeah, I knew it would happen type of moments where someone decides to color Sharpie on their face, or they decide that they want to wear all their clothes inside out. Or, you know what? it's kind of fun to, roll down the stairs. And I didn't realize there'd be a consequence of me having a skinned knee. So that extra 10 minutes, that margin, I used to hate doing that. I'm like, I shouldn't have to do this. So often in my life, I should not have to do this was my thought process. And then I finally had to admit, Christina, it doesn't matter what you think you should or shouldn't have to do. You need this margin of time so that you can not be so stressed, because that's awful. Rushing late into the appointment, driving fast there, and then people are looking at you and they're like, oh yeah, she's always late. That's not fun, is it? So having margin, like rest is margin. It's giving that space that you need and time to recoup. Another reason why taking rest and having a Sabbath is important is that Jesus modeled this. He took time to meet his needs. He took solitude. He had prayer time. He was sleeping. He met his physical needs of eating. I mean, like, hello, how many times have you missed a meal, or you just ate some food off of one of your kids' plates, or you found something that was somewhat edible in the fridge and you just did that quickly? That is an example of we're not taking care of ourselves. Are there moments? Yes, but it's the trend. It's the routine of continually not taking care of our basic needs, which will set us up for some big problems in the future. Because caring for your neurodiverse family often depletes your energy and my energy. But the difficulties of navigating the world also depletes your loved ones, right? I mentioned before earlier in this episode how going to school and having another example, it's like all these kids around second grade, third grade, maybe even the fourth grade, they begin understanding these rules of the classroom, rules of the playground. And sometimes my kids didn't pick up on that. They didn't understand what was okay or not. And unfortunately, there were teachers they had who treated it as them being spiteful and mean, when really it was just a neurodiverse kid who didn't know about all these rules that these other kids figured out and picked up on. So they were depleted. And even my spouse, if he is having a 4 to 5 day trip and tons of issues with flights, I mean, like, who's not having issues with flights right now, right? And then there's snowstorms and all these different things can be thrown in. That is going to be a lot on him. So when we see that having rest and Sabbath is for our own needs, but also to help with the difficulties of our loved ones are experiencing, that can really change our mindset and make it a priority. Now, you may be saying to me, Christina, yeah, that is never going to happen. You have no idea. You're right. I don't know all the details of what you're going through, but I can personally say I understand from the deepest part of my heart of being utterly exhausted that you fell asleep on the floor with a pillow, couldn't even make it to bed. You were so tired, and waking up and wondering, do I even have it to get it through today? Like, I don't know where this energy and stamina is going to come from. I understand that. I'm just asking you now, as I talk to you about how you're going to do that, to just imagine I can do one small thing. I'm going to continue always challenge you. There's always one small thing you can do for yourself. And if you start there and continue to add up and build upon that, you will be amazed on how that will help. Okay, these are my 3 basic tips on how you can begin adding a rest day, a Sabbath day into your life. Okay, first, define how you will honor the Sabbath or rest day. Again, depends upon your faith perspective. And what I mean by this is legalism in this topic is not helpful. As I mentioned before in an earlier Bible verse in Mark, that the Sabbath was made for us. It points us to Jesus, but also it is a need for us to rest. So what does it mean for you? And I also encourage you to, like, your family to have a Sabbath day. But first, I would encourage you just to consider this before you bring the topic up to your spouse and your kids and the whole family. Now, where I started is I was as simple as possible. So for me, there was no extra housework being done. I had to make meals, and we had to take care of the dishwasher. Those were two things. The meals and dishwasher were two things that needed to occur. One, the kids had to be fed, but two, it became overwhelmingly dysfunctional in our family if we did not have that dishwasher kept on. So then we had no work and no house projects. Now, I do have a background in disaster, so sometimes work was a little bit negotiable, but generally speaking, as much as possible, there wasn't house projects, no works, there was no therapies, no outside engagements, unless they happened to be with family and friends. There was a connectivity because there was resting, depending on the activity. There are some activities that would be stressful, and we tried to avoid those on the Sabbath. But if it was a good connection activity with family, then that fit the bill. Our goal was that quality time as a family, along with myself having solitude and quiet time by myself. So when you consider if you had a day, and oftentimes Sunday does work out really well with this, but maybe it's Saturday for you, or maybe it's Friday. It all depends upon your life and schedule. But a day where it's a quieter day, and you are doing the least amount of activities needed. That is a very simple goal. Now, for some people, they go very extreme. They don't go to any stores. They have food prepped ahead of time. That's way too much for us, right? That's way too much. But let's just keep it simple. Whatever is the normal load that you have for every single day of life, we want to bring that down. And this might have to happen over a couple of weeks. Now, as you talk to your family about this and your kids, because of the black and white thinking that can happen in neurodiverse relationships, we need to encourage them to be open-ended. And this is why it's good for you to think about this ahead of time, so you know what direction you want this to go and that you don't want it to be legalistic. This is not a checklist. This is something for everyone's good. Because having an hour or two of solitude and quiet time for someone who's neurodiverse can be so rejuvenating. Or if they're doing an hour or two of an enjoyable activity by themselves or with a family, maybe it's playing a board game. If your family enjoys doing that, that can be very life-giving. The goal is just a simple day that has some quality time built in as a family and solitude for yourself. Depending upon how things are going with your kids and with your spouse, family quality time may be difficult because of communication issues and regulation issues that are happening for your spouse or for your kids. I suggest just making it a simpler day, less sensory activities, overwhelming activities, less stimulus. Keeping it a simple day can be rewarding by itself. And as time goes along, the family quality time could happen. But what would it mean for you and your family if they do have a quieter, relaxing day? And they know eventually, okay, on Sunday, it's going to be an easier day. So this is an example of how this would work for us. I would write on the calendar that Saturday was family work day. There was an expectation that we were all working together on something we had to get done, whether it's outside or inside. But the idea was there was work being done. And on Sunday, it was written Sabbath or family rest day. And usually when the kids were younger, I put down family rest day on our calendar because they understood that. And they knew that when we would go to church and we get back home, and the first hour after we got back home from church, it was quiet. Everyone did their own thing. They had books, they were doing reading, or maybe some activities. It was just quiet. And I would make up a meal for lunch, be very simple. And then we would maybe do something together as a family. And then I would take some downtime for myself in the afternoon. And then Sunday was supper. It was really a very flexible, low-key day is what we try to make that. Now, the second thing is choose your Sabbath day. And whatever one makes the most sense for you and as you talk to your family, what would be the best day based on your schedule? And begin by just having 1 hour a week. If you feel like this is way overwhelming, then just start off with, hey, everyone, after lunch, because usually after lunch is a time on Sundays or Saturdays even where people are more laid back. So you can say, hey, after lunch today, we're going to have just 1 hour doing your own thing of quiet activity. And mom is going to go into her room, or you're going to go in the backyard, wherever you're going to go. But you make it clear, like, that's what's going to be happening. And then as time moves along, you can increase that to, like, we're going to have the afternoon. And after it's the afternoon, you can increase it. You can see what I'm saying? You slowly increase that time. Now, my schedule and your schedule does not work perfectly. We don't always have whatever day you're going to pick. That day is not always free from any obligations. There's weddings, there's special events, anniversary celebrations, funerals. There's so many different things that can be going on the weekends if that's what you choose as your rest day. Also, remind your loved ones that we need to be flexible on when we pick our rest day. And it's not always going to be the same day. So as you look over your week or your month, you may begin to start picking up, okay, I can see here most Sundays are going to work for a rest day, but oh goodness, we have a pretty active day on this Sunday, the last Sunday of the month. Then I would look at switching days around. For example, if I know we're going to have a 2-3 day trip coming up and it's going to be going over our rest day over the weekend. I know there are some preferred things that are happening, but it's going to be a lot of stress as well. I will plan ahead and make the day afterwards our Sabbath day, which may not always work because now we have our kids at home. But for you, it may be that next day you have less activities, or before you go, you make your rest day. Because knowing that if they have a quieter day of relaxing before going on a trip or before going into a very active day will help them. This is not always possible, but that has helped me when we are looking at the schedule. I automatically can see like, oh, wait, we have way too many activities going on here this week. And then we have this trip on Sunday. Like I need to find margin and rest time for myself and for my family. So the third thing to do is begin looking at your schedule. What are the activities that you can begin either canceling or rescheduling that are going to be on your chosen rest day or your Sabbath day? In the beginning, obviously, if you have a lot of things already planned during your whole 7 days of the week, it will not happen right away. But your goal, remember, is to take that 1 hour block. I suggest either right after lunch or actually sometimes when people come back from church is another good time. But having just a 1 hour block that you're slowly going to increase. One of the main solutions that came from all the difficulties I mentioned many years ago was a planner that I created. And through many iterations, now is going to be launching in the next couple months. And this planner's focus was looking at the roles I had to carry out and that were very important to me, but also how to take care of myself so that I could do those roles. By using a planner, you're able to see, as I was, where my time was going for activities, for the different roles I had, wife, mom, job, home management, but also what time was being used towards my own self-care. And as I did that, first off, it was just shocking to see how little time I was using for my own very basic self-care, food and sleeping. That's super, super basic, right? But seeing that and seeing how what I really needed so that I could be the wife and mom that I wanted to be, and seeing that difference, as I used the planner, I slowly began finding myself, slowly began finding joy, having some rest. And one of the pivotal parts of this was finding a Sabbath or rest day. If you're interested in this planner, look in the show notes. I have a link where you can sign up for my newsletter, and then you will be in the loop when that is releasing. But again, a quick recap. Sabbath is when we're stopping activities and efforts and we are resting in God. And if we are experiencing low joy, one of the reasons, as I mentioned from that book, Bounce by Dr. Marcus Warner, is that rest is a part of what we need to increase our joy, having that quiet time and margin. Also, Jesus, he modeled caring for our own needs. And the Bible talks about that, having a Sabbath. You need to define what you consider is a rest or Sabbath day. What is the best day of the week? And then what's that 1 hour you're going to start with? And then increasing it from there. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode, what you are looking at implementing, or maybe what you already are doing. That'd be great. Hey, thank you for joining me today. I pray this episode gave you encouragement to take one small step. Would you be willing to help other women like you find this show? If so, leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like more information on living in a neurodiverse relationship, check the show notes on how we can connect.